Hey everybody, how's it going? Good morning, Justin Reed with the Black Soccer Membership Association podcast. I just wanted to speak to you guys a little bit about just soccer and the importance of us being on the offense. It's kind of like a game, right? So in a game, good defense makes good offense, but eventually at some point in time, you got to go score some goals. And the reason why I bring that up is because I posted a video about the lady who had said that the BSMA, the name itself was racist. I received some comments and so forth, but I also received comments in terms of my comment about Black Lives Matter. Now I'm fully in support of the movement itself. I'm just not in support of the actual capitalization of the movement and what I see in terms of what's on their website. So I mentioned something about undocumented workers, and undocumented workers to me should not be on the site because again, it has nothing to do with the Black Lives Matter. I know it says we affirm the lives of undocumented workers, but I think that should just be somewhere else. That shouldn't be a focus of the Black Lives Matter movement. Not saying that their lives don't matter, their lives matter, but when it comes to American descendants of slaves, all of them are documented. So I don't understand why that's on the site. And then I also made a comment about the LGBTQ. Now, that comment was just in terms of looking at the numbers to determine, okay, well, how do you prioritize what's important when you have a movement and a foundation? And that's the only reason why that was mentioned. Nothing was mentioned about their rights not mattering or not being important. Their rights are 1,000% extremely important. We do know some of the things that the LGBTQ community goes through, and I think it's not right. I think they should have the right to express themselves. So the only reason why I had brought that up was just in terms of prioritizing things. If you go to our website, you'll see, okay, we do mention grants for club directors and club owners, but you can also make the suggestion, well, there aren't that many Black club directors. Why don't you have something for the players? And I think that would make sense as well because there are more Black players than there are actually Black club directors. I think around the country, there's probably only about 20 Black directors, if that, who actually own organizations, for soccer clubs, not training. There's thousands of us for training, but in terms of clubs, there's probably only about 20, but we've got thousands, tens of thousands of players all over the country. So that's just a suggestion. And that's the reason why I made that suggestion as well. Okay, well, why don't we take off undocumented workers and why don't we focus on wealth building? So one of the responses that I received was, had nothing to do with the wealth building part. It just had something to do with, well, human rights, focus on human rights, focus on human rights. We don't need any more, people with money because, which is more of a concern, people with money and building wealth or getting beat up by the police. Now, I'll give you guys a couple stories that I have encountered over the years when it comes to the police. I have a saying, and, my parents brought my brother, sister, and I up in terms of when you get stopped by the police, you just comply. That's important. Just comply. The goal is to get out of there without any confrontation. So there was one time I went to the Dallas Cup, and this was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I wasn't playing it. I wasn't coaching. I actually went to go support a friend of mine who was coaching down there at the time. But I went out to the Dallas, Texas Stadium. Everybody talked about Jerry's World. So I wanted to go check out this place. And my brother, he is a Cowboys fan. And I am now, of course, a Washington football team fan. It was Redskins at the time. So I'd always joke with him and I'd say, well, you've never been to Dallas. Why do you like the Dallas Cowboys? We didn't grow up on Dallas. Neither one of us. I've been to Dallas, of course, but I don't think he's been, or maybe he's gone once. I don't know. But regardless, I went to the stadium. I picked up some like golf balls for him, and I got him, I think, like a jersey. I can't even remember the name of the player. But coming back from Arlington, I was on the highway and I was coming back towards Dallas to head back to the hotel. And I noticed a police officer was driving next to me and he kept looking into the window while all these cars were just zooming past me. So eventually he would come over and he would, go behind the car and follow me for a little bit and continue following me and then go to the side and keep looking in. So eventually I got off the exit and I got off an exit with a shopping center because it was public. And of course he followed me off the exit. And in the meantime, what he was doing was he called for backup. right? So I got off the exit and I ended up parking. And all of a sudden, I look behind and I see this police officer gets out of the car. And then I see backup coming in from nowhere. So he questions me and he asked me and he said, we got a call that there was a black male with a cap and glasses, and I was wearing a cap and glasses, who had just robbed a store not too long ago. And I said, well, it clearly was me. I came back from the stadium. I was in the Dallas stadium, and I'm a visitor. I have no reason to do that. So I ended up getting off the exit, of course, and the police officers came and they all spoke to me and everything. And then there was one cop who so happened to be from Virginia, and he was a Redskins fan. So I think one of the officers, he was kind of like mean mugging the car, and he looked in the car and everything. So he did see that there was a bag that I got from the Dallas Cowboys stadium that had a golf ball and a jersey in it. So the one other officer who I mentioned, he is from the Virginia area. So we just started talking about the Redskins and all that stuff, and everything was good. They apologized and they said, sorry, you just fit the profile. I said, cool. All right. You guys have a good day. Now, the reason why I bring up that story is important as Black males to, just make sure we leave any situation with a police officer um, alive. I guess, because we hear stories all the time, like the George Floyd incident, for example. I mean, that's just a horrible, horrible, horrible incident. And to this day, I mean, I can't believe that an officer would do that to another human being. I mean, that was just crazy. But of course, there's a possibility that things could have gone much better. I know those officers, they may have a racist past, they may have a record. But I really wish that, Mr. Floyd could have found a way to get himself out of that situation without that outcome. All right. So I just bring that up just because, it's important when it comes to human rights and civil rights and all that stuff. We want to fight for it, but we also want to do it in a way where we know the system is against us, but we have to continue to comply, in a sense, because we want to live another day to see our family members. So I just brought that up, just because this one person who I commented kept saying, oh, stop focusing on wealth, stop focusing on wealth, focus on human rights. And my reply to him was pretty much, look, I mean, at some point in time, we got to focus on wealth building because we have to leave something for our families. We're only on this earth, 60, 70 years if we're lucky, 80, 90, 100 years if we're very lucky. So I don't want to spend my time only focusing on that. I want to spend my time actually building wealth and, providing opportunities for my children and my nieces and, everybody who is in my family. So it's important that we think about that. And again, I bring this up because it seems to be kind of like a reaction in the Black community whenever we talk about wealth. Like you've got some people on the side of human rights, civil rights. They're against, capitalism. They're against money. Money's bad. Money's this. Money's that. And then you got others like myself. We're for human rights. We're for civil rights, but we still got to live our lives, right? We can't live in fear, and we have to focus on leaving something for our families. All right, so that's important as well. So wealth is important and we have to continue to build it. And we can't so much worry and focus on, human rights and, all the time. It's important, but we can't do it all the time. Another example I'd bring up is Ice Cube. Ice Cube came out before the presidential election. He came out with a contract called Contract with Black American. I thought it was a great contract. I've read it twice. Excellent work. But because he had met with the Trump administration, that was a big problem for a lot of people. So a lot of people, specifically Black people, they didn't look at the fact that he wrote something. He stepped out and said, hey, look, I'm going to write this contract and I'm going to, come out. I mean, because he has no reason to do that, right? I mean, Ice Cube is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He has no reason to do that. He'll be just fine regardless, even if he didn't do it. But to have people come out and just go against him and just kind of focus on, the fact that he met with the Trump administration was pretty stupid, right? And it demeans the fact that you've got a celebrity here trying to do something that's best for the community, but that's the reaction. That's the reaction. The reaction is, oh, you met with the Trump administration, you're no longer accepted in the community, you're a sellout, you're this, you're that. I mean, it's just stupid. It's just stupid. And unfortunately, that tends to be the rhetoric in our community anytime we talk about money. Anytime we talk about money and building wealth, it's a problem. And again, I'll go back to the statistic that I, mentioned in the podcast. I talked about the number of Black millionaires there are, and there's 35,000 out of a population of 43 million. That's only 0.08% or 0.8% compared to the white population, which is about 205 million, and they've got about 22 millionaires. So that's 10.7%, right? So that's drastically different in terms of their wealth compared to our wealth. So what if we did build wealth, all right, and we did get an opportunity now to be at the 10.7% out of 43 million? Let's just round it down to 10%. That's 4.3 million Black millionaires. Don't you think that'll help us to get our community out of poverty? All right, Baltimore City, you've got a poverty rate of 25%. DC, I think the poverty rate there is about 18, 19%. Chicago, it's in the 20s. I mean, we have a lot of people in our race that in poverty, and part of it is because we have not built wealth specifically for ourselves. We've always focused on other people to give us stuff, whether to give us a job or to give us a handout or to give us this or give us that. And we got to focus on ourselves. All right. Now, how does this correlate in terms of soccer? This correlates in terms of soccer because we have to focus on building the programs that we currently have and building upon more programs. All right. That's the best way that we're going to be able to do anything in this soccer community. Because again, this soccer community kind of resonates, or what's the word? It resembles the community, right? It resembles the community where us in the soccer community, we're kind of focusing on just working for somebody, working for somebody is fine. I'm not against that. But at some point in time, when are you going to talk about building wealth? When are you going to talk about moving on to the next step? And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that I'd like to challenge everyone. I took that step 14 years ago. It hasn't been easy. It's been a struggle, along the way when I started my organization, but you got to do it and you got to try it and you got to come out of the box and you got to think, how can you build wealth? How can you build within this capitalistic system? Like, we know that this system isn't necessarily the best. We know there are some companies that aren't a great example of capitalism. I'll say Amazon is one. I read an article recently where a lot of their employees are just struggling. And that's just crazy, seeing that the founder of Amazon is worth close to $200 billion. Why are your employees struggling? All right, so that's probably one bad example of capitalism, but you've got another example of capitalism, which is the founder of Costco. And I remember reading an article about him about 10, 12 years ago, where he took about $300,000 as his salary, and he made sure that all of his employees got paid above the minimum wage. So I think now at Costco, a minimum wage employee gets paid like $18 and $20 an hour. Regardless, that's way above the state level. Most states minimum wage is about $7, $8. The federal level I think is about $7.25, and then some states are probably about $10 to $11. All right, so that's a good example about capitalism, and we have to now start thinking, okay, well, how can we create jobs? How can we create opportunities? Okay, because that's how you make society as a whole better. All right, so just want to thank everybody for listening. I just felt the need to express the need of, there's human rights and there's civil rights, which is something that we have dealt with in the past, back in the 1960s and prior, all the way back to slavery days. And, our ancestors did an excellent job of helping us to get out of that. We've now gotten out of, in terms of getting our civil rights. I won't say we're out of the woods. Yes, there are things that are still extremely biased in this country, but we got to now take the next step. We got to take the next step. I mean, it's kind of like what Jay-Z said. I know a lot of people got down on Jay-Z for saying, well, at what point in time do you stop kneeling? He's right. I mean, at what point in time do we start thinking, well, what's the next step from civil rights? What's the next step from human rights? And I think that next step is building a community. Now, some of us are doing it. Some of us are building wealth, but it's how do we continue to do that and change our mindset that there is a next step. We shouldn't always be on defense. At some point, we got to go on offense, and we got to talk about offense. All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you guys on the BSMA podcast. You guys have a great day.